so much for joining me on Being Indispensable. My name's Liz Van Vliet. We're all dispensable. I know that better than anyone. I'm a breast cancer survivor. But that doesn't mean that we can't invest in ourselves to improve the skills and capabilities that are going to help us stand out and be perceived as indispensable. Being indispensable is also about the being side of the equation. Because if we're not looking after ourselves and our own well-being, then we have no hope of showing up as indispensable in the workplace. Do you want to just come closer and we can have an informal chat on the podcast?
Let's do it.
Come on, bring your chair over.
Okay. Hi, podcast.
So we might drop this episode as a little bonus episode, I think.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
But if you're going to be a podcast bomb, you have to come closer to the microphone. Right. So I'm giving her a lesson in podcast bombing. She has to be a hand width apart from the big microphone, which she can't look at because it looks a bit phallic.
I was about to say it is an interesting shape, and every time I sit at your desk, I have to push it to the side because it creeps me out.
I know, and I think for the benefit of the listeners, I'm going to actually put a photo of this up on Instagram because, it's quite shocking looking, really.
It is, honestly.
Especially when you're a young, innocent young lady who really doesn't have a lot of experience in looking
Mum,
at...
okay, we're cutting that out.
We're cutting this out of the podcast. That's so funny. Okay, so Kate.
It's phallic shaped and it makes me feel weird.
That's right. Okay. And
that's also being cut because...
But I'm fine with it. So anyway, back to podcast bombing. So Kate, you're podcast bombing and you're able to podcast bomb because you're sitting up here sharing a space with me. Why don't you tell everyone why that is the case?
Well...
Talk into the microphone, darling.
Well, COVID-19 has wreaked chaos on my first year of university, and right now, if it was not a crisis, I would be down in Canberra at the Australian National University for my first year, but I'm not. I'm back here at home because the residences have shut with my mum and my dad and the girls because ANU has shut all its residences to anybody that has the ability to go home. So I've come home and I'm sharing the home office with mum and dad, which has been great.
Yes, and it's like a revolving door because basically we have 3 desks but only 2 office chairs. Mm-hmm. So that really means that only 2 of us can be here at any given moment. And because Kate tends to be the most diligent of the 3 of us, she's the one that's up here. So Mike and I are basically doing a little tag team that when he's not here, I get to be here. And when he's here, I want to be anywhere but here, actually, if the truth be known, because he drives me up the wall. And sharing a home office with him is going to be a path to imminent divorce.
So I just chair hop between mum and dad's chairs.
Can I just tell you, I was listening to a podcast last night when I was going to sleep, and your father was lying next to me, snoring like a Trojan. And the podcast was talking about how Esther Perel, who is people on the listening may or may not know, she's a Belgian I think she might be more than a psychologist. She might be a psychosexual therapist. I don't know. She's got a lot of stuff going on. But anyway,
too much time on it.
She's got far too much time going on. She's got far too much time on her hands. But one of the things has been talking about is that COVID-19 is going to serve as an accelerator for people to either get married and have babies or get divorced.
Yeah. And, well, if you're not at that stage, COVID-19 is just wreaking havoc.
That's right. But, if you're not at that stage, well, good luck to you, and can I have some of what you're having?
Please.
Unless it's alcohol, and then I don't want it because I'm trying not to drink during the COVID-19 outbreak. Anyway, so Kate is also podcast bombing because I wanted to give her a shout out on the podcast. All outside the home office, we're giving a shout out to somebody who's just walked past but is smart enough not to try to come in the door, and that would be Mike, the husband. Anyway, back to Kate. So Kate is also getting a shout out on the podcast for being my little in-house psychologist, talking doctor, unqualified therapist who has just been such a wonderful little sounding board. And we do these walks and talks. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see a lot of pictures of Kate and I doing our self-isolation walks and talks. And we did a lot of walks over summer.
You'll see you were about.
Yep, came back from her gap year, and we went out and did a huge, epic challenge over the break. But having her home from Canberra has so many benefits. And so far, the highlights would be walks and talks, where we get to walk and have our little talks ever, but also having her here as my little, she's my little life coach.
Aww.
It's so awesome.
I love it.
So she's just every day I get to have somebody who is just genuinely interested in. I'm making it sound like my husband's really not interested. The truth is, he spends most of his time hiding from me.
When the two of us team up, it's not good for anyone.
Yeah. Daddy's coping. But
that's okay.
So the main reason for Kate podcast bombing was because I invited her to podcast bomb because I've been wanting to thank her for being such a strong and just resilient little daughter, not so little anymore, almost 20, probably going to have a coronavirus birthday.
Probably.
But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But that was really why you podcast bombing. Aww. Not because I'm sick to death of you being up in my business. Because I quite like having you up in my business.
I know, I quite like being up here.
Metaphorically, of course.
Yeah, we're not that close.
That would be really weird and awkward. And I definitely need some help if that was... Let's just stop that train of thought. That is just too weird.
We're heading down a path.
Yes. But the great thing is that she gets to sit up here, and she's been such a big supporter of me in terms of what I've done with being indispensable from the get-go. In fact, you cite the story of how you remember sitting in the back seat as we were driving down for an Easter weekend. It would be 4 years ago now, wouldn't it? I think it is 4 years ago.
6?
No, not that long.
2014.
2014. Oh, my God. It is 6 years ago.
6 years.
No, it wasn't. It was 2015. So 5 years ago was when I first started talking about launching a podcast. And I was workshopping with Mike the names in the car for the idea of the podcast and why I wanted to start a podcast. And Kate brings that up and reminds me, Mum, look how far you've come.
Every time. Every single time. I remember that. I remember the naming of the podcast. I remember being driven to school when I was about probably 2016, just after the podcast had been launched, and listening to other podcasts in the car with you. Because Mum is not only has her own podcast, she is a very, very, prolific, that's it, the P word I'm looking for, a prolific listener of other podcasts. And the most prolific listener that I know, and I think it's very admirable. It helps me out when I get podcast recommendations that then help me out at uni or at school. But I remember sitting in that car and hearing whoever it was on the podcast talking about how things take time. And I'm so proud of Mum and where Being Indispensable has gotten, because it's now been, 5-6 years?
Well, the podcast is definitely,
almost at 100.
I know. Cannot believe it. I'm going to break the 100.
We're going to do it.
I'll tell
you're going to
you.
do it. I'm just going to sit in the corner over there.
And eavesdrop on my recordings.
And be calm by the wonderful Linda. And
everyone can play a game for the next little while during COVID-19 to see if you can hear Kate either tapping away on her keyboard whilst I'm doing an interview, or like
sneezing.
Today, in an episode I recorded today, sneezing and trying to muffle her sneeze.
It was very funny. Successful.
So it's a nice change up from what we usually have, which is Sally barking at the door when I'm in the middle of a podcast recording to say, let me in, let me in. Anyway, is there anything else you want to share with the listeners?
I don't know. Well, I hope you like the podcast. I hope you like the podcast bomb that I've done. And I look forward to hearing lots more of the podcast being recorded into the future. And I hope that you love listening to my mum just as much as I love listening to her every day. And keep listening to Being Indispensable, because I get so much out of it. And I know that you do as well. So rock on. It's going to be, COVID-19 will end and everything will go back to normal. And I hope everyone gets through it.
That's very sweet. Well, there you go. The podcast bomb. That's what we're going to call this episode. Podcast bomb with Kate. Love you, listeners.
See you later.
But not as much as I love my gorgeous girl.
Not as much as I love you and your husband and your other two
dogs. Yes, let's not forget about that.
Yeah, let's forget about that.
And the dog.
And the dog. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Not as much as I love you and my husband and my two other kids and the dog.
Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.